Nowadays, when you build along the river, the city requires that you set at least 30 feet back from the water to create a public area. Now, they negotiate the fact that their building gets to hang above their riverwalk. And then to the right side or west side of the building, you got train lines, commuter rail down at ground level, the same ones that there's actually, I think we heard a train passing underneath this white plaza here to the right. So that building kind of hangs above those tracks, and they have their own plaza capping them. So different set of trains than one of our iconic L's passing here. Now, right about now, make sure you're looking up at the side of the building. You're going to see a really cool effect here. Might almost look like waves going up it. So it has these angled fins on the side of it. Depending on the time of day and where you are, that can look more or less dramatic. So when we come back by it again, take a look and see how it looks different from the other angle. Another great thing to see in this building, yourselves reflected right back at you in the angle. Oh, there we are. If you see yourself, feel free to wave, say hi, take a selfie of yourself taking a selfie. That makes sense, I think. And we'll talk more about the actual engineering that holds that building up when we come back by it. But it was designed by the Chicago firm Getch Partners. They did such a great job there. They got the commission to do the building going up to our left. 110 North Wacker Drive. Now this is another new office tower, going to be 54 stories tall. There was a smaller building here, it was less than 10 stories, that was right on the water's edge. So that was torn down to make way for it. It's from the 1950s. So this one, well, we get the benefit of the setback. It's important to understand when new buildings go up in Chicago, the soil here is awful for skyscrapers. You have to go down over 100 feet. So typically they use the caisson system. Now that involves digging a shaft through the soft clay soil to get into the bedrock, usually putting a steel tube inside of that, which creates a nice chamber for your support columns to be built into. So usually steel reinforced concrete goes inside, then you have a nice sturdy base to put your tall buildings atop. Next building here to the left, Civic Opera Building, 1929, Graham Anderson Probst and White design. Once again, you'll see some of those Art Deco elements. Check out the vertical lines filling up the side of the building. Sometimes I get the question, why are there no windows on this side of the building? Well, that's the backstage area. You don't need windows in a theater. And I also get the question, why is it spelled Civic Opera the shape in that alphabet? So you find the next best thing, the V, and it makes it look extra fancy. Yeah, so we've seen a lot of buildings. We've seen a few different Art Deco designs. We've seen some different revivalist buildings. So those are the kind of the more ornate styles of the early 20th century. Then you get into the 1930s. Well, the Great Depression sets in. In fact, the first opera company to be in the Civic Opera Building only lasted 3 years because of the Depression. After the Depression, you get World War II. There's over 20 years with no major skyscraper is built in Chicago. Then we get in the 1950s. They start building again, but in that time period, tastes and technologies have changed. So we start getting buildings like you see to the right. Simple, less is more architecture. These two twin buildings here from the 1960s. They are from the 1960s. And I mentioned earlier this style is pioneered by Mies van der Rohe. These buildings were not designed by him, they were designed by his former students. Mies van der Rohe is a big force here in the city, or was. He was a teacher and a designer, so you'll see a lot of less is more design here. Sometimes it'll be in the black box style, other times you'll see it evolve into like what that white building is there to the right. Still a simple box with different materials and colors. Now over here to the left, I don't always get to point this out, but we do have a barge passing. There's a cement plant up on the north branch of the river, so that's the major thing that sends barges up the river. But the tug that pushes these barges has a pilot house that's on a pneumatic lift. Look at it right now, you'll see it raising up. So yeah, that pilot house can lower down to get under the bridges, then raise up when it gets between them, and then they have the spotters up front helping them out there. Oh hey, get ready, we are about to pass under Route 66. Yeah, keep the road connecting us all the way out you'll find the signage that begins in 66. Just across from the Art Institute if you're looking for that photo op. Now take a look here to the right, you'll see a smaller black building with the big X's on it. Now when that opened in the 1970s, it was known as the Mid-American Commodities Exchange. Nowadays it's known as a gym. But back then they wanted it to have a wide open trading floor. So the designers took the support columns that might have run down the center of that floor, put them right there on the outside. Those X's are structural supports. Now they very deliberately kept them exposed, right? They didn't put them behind a window or a wall. We call that structural expressionism. It's another way you can emphasize simplicity. Let's go ahead and leave that steel skeleton on the outside. Next up, take a look back here to the left, and you're going to find a gray mural running up the side of this building. As it comes into view, you might figure out what it is. A giant map. See the Y shape up towards the top? That's the Wolf Point area. The red rectangle in the middle? You are there. Now, that used to be a big giant blank wall, till about 5 years ago. See, that's an example of a building built in an era, 1970s, when we didn't really respect this river. You know, it has a long history of being a polluted industrial shipping corridor. So buildings often reflected the attitude of the city. They were built with their backs to the water. Well, nowadays, we like this river a lot more, so it got new owners, and they reflected the current attitude by adding a mural to the back of it. And now we actually pay attention to it as we go by. If we turn back here to the right, you're going to see another very large Art Deco building. Currently in the middle of a very large renovation. We'll start with its history. This is the old main post office. Completed early 1930s, designed by Graham, Anderson, Probst, and White, with over 2 million square feet of space. It was the largest post office in the world. To emphasize how large, realize that the 8-lane highway we're about to pass under goes right through the center of it. However, when the post office was completed, Congress Parkway, or as it's now known, Ida B. Wells Drive, did not exist. But they knew it was coming. They designed the building with a hole in the middle. Yeah, that's the proper way to prepare for Chicago progress. Now, unfortunately, that building turned out to not be the most efficient design for a post office. One of the issues, it's relatively tall. They wasted time and money shipping and sorting mail vertically within the building itself. In elevators, that would sometimes break down, back up the whole system. So, in the 1990s, the Postal Service decided it was time to vacate the old building, and they would build the new main post office all the way across the street, as a single floor where the sorting takes place. Now, the old building would then sit empty for about 2 decades. So finally, in 2016, the real estate developers who own it started an over $600 million renovation project. It's the largest adaptive reuse project in the country as they convert it into office space. And it's actually in September that the first phase of that redevelopment will open up. The biggest tenant announced so far, Walgreens, drugstore chain. They're going to move some of their corporate office space in. So we're very excited that something is finally happening with a building that right now we just drive through. But speaking of exciting, right now I'm going to kind of shift gears here for a bit, because it is now time to share with you one of Chicago's most iconic stories. That's right, let's heat things up. It's time for the Great Chicago Fire. Now, the reason I like to tell this story right now is because about a mile or so to our southwest is where you would have found Mrs. O'Leary's barn. And that's where the story begins. In early October of 1871, it was in that barn that apparently Mrs. O'Leary's cow kicked over a lantern, setting the city ablaze. There's a little more to it than that. See, at the time we were in the middle of a drought, conditions very dry. Chicago, 1871, mostly made of wood. Now you combine that with a strong wind blowing that night, it was